Welcome. I'm Angelica.
And I'm Gaia. Today we're speaking to Ideja, 21-year-old founder of startup Edvance AI. Hi, Ideja.
Hello, so honored to be here.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for the invitation.
So what is Edvance AI?
Essentially an artificial intelligence consultancy supporting a wide variety of individuals, SMEs, and businesses, mainly in the sort of legacy-based sector, including asset management, healthcare, real estate, that actually supports them in implementing AI effectively before they can actually curate all these different tools. So it's sort of, I guess the philosophy around it is actually understanding it from a literacy perspective from the ground up, as opposed to, adding a shiny new tool on top of their business models.
So being so young, being 21, recently graduated from St. Andrews, how did you get exposed to this? How did you come up with the idea and how did you create it?
It's a fascinating story, I think. So the most non-linear pathway ever. I, of course, went into St. Andrews studying cell biology and figuring that, okay, I'm going to come out with a PhD. I'm going to be an academic in this space. And I sort of 2 years into my degree ended up doing a startup internship in one of the summers in Paris, actually. And I sort of went in, loved the energy and thought, okay, 9 to 5 corporate is not for me. I know that for sure. I love to be my own boss, that's for sure. And I love the sort of energy of everyone working together on a shared problem in a small and lean team. I sort of came out of that thinking the biotech space is very kind of difficult to get into if you don't have a PhD. They were lovely in there, interns are great at doing the baseline stuff. But if you wanted to go beyond, you really need to actually get a PhD. And I started to see at the same time, I wasn't really into academics alongside my degree. And I saw that AI was something I was becoming super fascinated by. And I was self-teaching myself how to code, how to understand these models, since it links so deeply with cells, essentially. And then I get a really random email in my inbox, like 2 weeks after I finished my startup in Paris. And it was a Women in STEM business accelerator by Standard Chartered that was just like, okay, you study a STEM degree, you're between 18 to 25, apply, you have 2 weeks to create a business. And so I thought, okay, this feels like a sign of some sort.
Yeah.
That kickstarted it. And I ended up sort of going through the entire program, 2 weeks initially, had no real idea of what I was actually going to curate. Went onto YouTube, searched AI, and then the idea of agencies came up and how to sell and how to curate them from various different influencers. And then I realized, okay, this is what I can do. I can package the knowledge I've just learned and curated and build that into a business. And so that's sort of, how Edvance started.
Incredible. So how did you see the gap?
The gap from talking to a lot of people and actually interacting with a lot of people around me. So when I was learning AI myself and trying ChatGPT back in, this must have been December 2022, just a month after it came out, a lot of my friends were sort of saying, how do we use this? We see you using this really strange service. What is it? And how can we learn more about it? And so I would sort of sit around with my friends and teach them how to write little texts to ChatGPT in the early days.
Like
and they
prompts.
were fascinated.
Yeah,
Prompts, exactly. Prompts before prompts really were a thing. Because it was mainly just trial and error, just put anything in, see what comes out. And then I was doing the same for my family. They're very much into, research and always need the latest tools. And then it sort of clicked in my head that everything was piecing together, that I love helping people, talking to people about things, and then realized that this was a massive gap because everyone was asking me about it. So.
When you're educating people in these corporations, what are the main obstacles for them? What are the things that they struggle with the most?
Yeah, I would say actually the literacy element. So it's very easy to find someone who can build you these AI tools or get specialists in. But the biggest problem is actually that gap between, okay, we have a shiny new tool now, but then nobody understands it. And the people that do understand it are very likely one AI engineer or a team of 3 maximum. The rest of the sales, marketing, distribution teams actually have no idea what the linkage is between the two because they were never taught about it.
Do you think there's an age gap? There's an age element there. So people that are part of older generations struggle with it more?
Yeah, there is an underlying element of that. But I've also noticed those older generations are very much more willing and open to learn. They just haven't really had the environment or people around to support them. Absolutely. So of course, younger generations have perplexity in their pockets, right? But the older generations who really understand their industries, they don't really have, support. And it's almost a case of a taboo where they don't feel safe enough to ask those questions because they're seen as so senior. And they're thinking, okay, we don't know where to ask these things. We can't go into ChatGPT because we don't understand how to use it. So I think that was my perfect market.
Interesting. Where do you see the business going?
I have some quite big visions for it.
As you should.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I definitely want to sort of continue this model with the kind of educational training consulting. I started first actually building AI solutions for educational technology companies and then pivoted out about a year into it when I noticed that this industry is going through a winter in their funding periods. So they couldn't really afford to have our solutions in. So I made the flip to training, love it. And I think I'm going to stay on this route. But I'm definitely using these next few years to just learn everything I can about all of these different industries and sectors. And then eventually pivot into some sort of product that marries all of the queries and ideas I found out from talking to all these business leaders. Because I've met some really fascinating people, and I'd rather build, a painkiller than a vitamin when it comes to a product. So, yeah.
What do you have your eye on now? What specific niche of AI do you think is the most exciting?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think there's quite a few. Healthcare, for one of them, is incredibly fascinating. The way doctors are now, handing out even more accurate diagnostic tools than they ever did before is just absolutely incredible. I think education, we're seeing the entire internal structure of institutions that we really have never questioned before completely flip on their head because everybody's essentially using artificial intelligence to submit coursework pieces. And so a lot of professors and, big leaders are thinking, what do we do? Where do we sort of move from this? So education 100% is being flipped. But I also think the future of work is completely changing because I guess in the educational systems, you're taught, don't use these tools, it's cheating. But then you leave university and you're entering into a workforce that is completely saturated.
Optimization focused as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And all the CVs are essentially AI written. So it's like you're actually at a competitive loss if you're not using these tools. I think those three are the most exciting areas.
We were actually speaking to a founder who was telling us how important it is to learn how to prompt ChatGPT. And this reel came up on my feed the other day, which was a brain scan of someone using ChatGPT. And the way your brain fires up when you're using that versus the traditional mode of studying is so different.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of education, there's a lot of research that needs to be done to explore that.
It is so different. When you're speaking about education as well, I obviously don't know how teenagers are interacting with ChatGPT and how they're interacting with their GCSEs and how they're interacting with A-level. But I remember being 16 and sitting down to write an essay and just staring at a blank piece of paper for hours, struggling to write the first sentence. And that whole process is now gone.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean for brain development? What does that mean for expanding your vocabulary, expanding your hand-eye coordination when you write? All that has changed and will change.
Of course. Of course.
And so how do you think people will react to that?
I think there's a lot of misconception in that space as well. So what I'm seeing is almost two different outlooks on this. So we have, just like you said, the MIT paper that was released that completely, showed that our brain neurons were dying essentially after going from handwritten papers all the way to AI. And then you have the flip side where these students are actually now becoming a lot more agile in their thinking because they don't need to,
absolutely.
right? They don't need to ask questions and, wait until they go to school. They have everything in their pockets. So I think we're going to see the intelligence levels really continuously increase for these young children. However, if they don't have the foundational thinking skills that we were taught traditionally,
that's what we were thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the point.
You're missing out.
But I guess it's also really interesting because studying and the process of, writing an essay was traditionally a very solitary activity. So you would have to be alone with your thoughts.
Yeah.
But I guess ChatGPT emulates that social interaction, which is sort of unique to the work environment, which is what people struggle with. So if you can leverage it in a way that still requires you to think when you prompt well, that's super interesting, because it's a complete shift in the way that we view, studying and research. It's so interesting.
Absolutely. And I think that is the way it sort of stems from, I guess, actually being able to build these AI tools and being able to craft alongside them is mainly a case of we have a gap between the students who are using these tools straight away because they're picking them up on TikTok and they can hear everything, At this point, everyone is born with a phone in their hand. And this is the first generation also to be born into not knowing life before AI, which is also another daunting thing. I think the issue here is they have access to this, but they don't have the education to tell them, okay, this is how you need to use it effectively. This is what's missing. So I personally think a baseline curriculum of AI literacy should be implemented everywhere, literally in every single nation. And
what does that look like?
Yeah. So modeling off the UAE, they just announced that from ages 4 to 18, they're going to have AI literacy education constantly. So every single day, they're going to link it, learn with AI tools, or, learn the demographics and the terminology. Yeah.
This means we need to stay on top of this as well.
That's what I was
because
thinking, because we've missed the train.
We've missed that train.
Yeah.
Just
I
like
don't think you have. I think we're pre-CASM. I think this is the early stage still. If you think about it, we're only 3 years in. It took the internet a good 10 years until it became widestream.
Mainstream.
So I think you guys are in a perfect place.
So what can we do to make sure we're not left behind?
Start using AI as your learning tool. So actually go to AI, and instead of thinking, okay, how do I write a prompt? Where do I learn all this knowledge? Speak to AI. As creepy as it sounds.
Yeah. Engage
Actually,
with it as if it were a person.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you can learn how to prompt engineer by saying, you are a prompt engineer. Teach someone who is not a prompt engineer how to prompt engineer.
That is so interesting, because another reel that popped in my feed was this AI expert that was explaining the concept of AI being an actor, and you having to be so descriptive in the way that you prompt him that you get to a point.
Him.
I'm so sorry. This happens to me so often.
So this is something interesting
Let's
as
talk
well,
about
which is
it.
sexism in AI. Gaia
I know.
consistently refers to ChatGPT as him.
I do.
Have you asked him?
I can't.
Have you spoken
I can't.
to him? To me, it's an it.
I agree.
It's not a thing. It's not a human. It's not a
so
person.
bad. It's so bad.
But then to refer to it as a guy.
No, but
what does
you
that
know
mean
why?
to you?
Yes, you're right. But also, do you know, I thought about this long and hard, because she has prompted this for me. I've thought about this. And the reason I think is, so the fact that the name sounds masculine to me.
Really? Chat.
Yes. Because there's nothing feminine about the name. And so my brain defaults to something that's masculine. What I wanted to ask you, which I think is really interesting, is the concept of AI in healthcare. Because I think that there's a lot of bias there, and there's a lot of fear, I think, because something as precious and as, essential to us as health, it's just so, the concept of handing that over to a machine rather than a human is just so terrifying. The fact that a machine is going to be telling me if I have cancer or not, or is going to be analyzing a medical test, as psychologically as a human being, to hand that over to a machine is quite terrifying.
Yeah.
So how can we as a society work towards embracing AI and working with that fear?
I think actually starting by seeing AI as the tool and never actually as the replacement for the human.
Right.
That's the main part here, where it's so easy to think, okay, AI is going to take over the world. It's literally going to consume us. But inherently, it doesn't have feelings, thoughts, actual mobility. So I don't believe it's going to reach the phase where it will take over humans' role, especially in healthcare, because we value each other's lives way too much. And to have a robot do an entire heart transplant when you know that there's such a human element to it, I don't believe that would be a thing. So starting with that, and then I think actually just breaking the taboo of talking about AI, even in healthcare. A lot of my medical friends ask me about AI because they're just sort of like, we don't know. We've never, been exposed to it as much.
What do you mean by taboo? Because I've never seen it personally as something taboo.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's just because in our industry,
I think
it's integral to optimizing outputs, basically.
Yeah.
It makes work so much quicker and better.
I think it's because there's not that much at stake.
Absolutely.
Healthcare is
There's a lot at
something
stake.
that is,
Absolutely.
you know, vital to our existence, basically.
You're dealing with human lives, essentially. And there's a lot actually happening in the healthcare movements now than there was last year. You see all these AI health tech startups and they're great, but you almost have to think about what their sole purpose is as a business. If they're just building it for the sake of, let's raise a new seed round because all of the VCs are now only investing in AI. So let's go straight for that.
Yes.
And then it sort of makes you question, what is the purpose of the business, the soul of it? Why are they building in AI in healthcare? Do they genuinely want to help people? So I think that's where you have to draw the line. And, you know,
so who's trying to make money here and who's trying to actually provide a solution.
And that's where I think AI actually gives us more time by automating the kind of mundane tasks like emails and text messages, etc., to actually give us free time to think and be in solitude, to understand the point of human discernment and agency. I think it almost empowers us if you use it correctly, but that does start with learning the basics and doing prompting and then figuring out, you know, what's next.
Do you think it's a bubble?
Yes.
Right.
But I don't believe it's going to burst.
Okay.
Yes.
Think it'll shrink, not burst?
I think it will shrink.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So when you're in sort of a bubble space, especially when it comes to technology, it's almost an inflation of a few hyper ideals, hyper monopolies who will then sort of curate such hype around it that there's actually more marketing than actual substance coming out of it. And so eventually the idea of it bursting would be that none of the AI tools are working and it was all just a hoax and no one is actually getting any money or value. The VCs would pull out their funding from these startups and it would just completely collapse. I don't believe that is the case because I actually think these monopolies are quite smart in the sense that they sort of, I guess, fed in these AI tools seamlessly. People just picking it up by word of mouth and seeing someone use, you know, ChatGPT in the library, for example. And that's how it cascaded. It was never, this is in your face, use it now.
It's natural.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It was very natural. So I think it will shrink into possibly quantum next.
And I guess all the sort of faux businesses will teeter out over time.
Completely. All
That
of the
will,
the wrappers. There's so many where it's like ChatGPT is the baseline model, so OpenAI, and then you have different, you know, use cases layered on top through different design tools, low code, no code, where they're sort of mapping themselves as the first HR ready AI assistant. But if you break it down, it's all just ChatGPT operational models underneath, and then they're just building on top. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of these tools. I think those will fizzle out. And it's part of the reason why I haven't created a product in that space, because I kind of see that same, I don't know, the same sort of monotony.
You want to let the dust settle.
So what exactly is your product to people who don't understand AI in that way?
Of course. So it's not necessarily a product. It's more of a service-based business. So it's a pipeline that we take clients through to sit and help them understand AI from a confidence perspective. So going in initially with maybe a 90-minute, 1-hour workshop to one of their teams, depending, it could be marketing, client distributions, etc., especially the non-technical teams, because I wish for them to understand AI the same as a technical group would. And then going into some sort of AI audit assessment, so sitting down with their teams or entire businesses, mapping where they need AI, because inherently they're adding these AI tools, but where does it actually fit properly into the workflow? And then consulting or training retainers, just so we can act as their advisor, essentially.
And will you source all the products which you'll then give to them and hand over to them?
Yeah. And then mainly, I prefer not to use sort of AI wrappers and tools like that. It's more, you have Copilot, you have, you know, Gemini, etc. How do they use that? So I'm more of a proponent of, you have the tools there already.
Right.
Let's get to using these and then get down to specific use cases if need be.
Do you envision this at some point becoming a B2C venture?
Possibly. Depends, I think, because there's also a lot of noise in the sense of products that are almost acting as a middle ground layer for AI readiness. So, you know, slotting in a B2B SaaS that then cascades down into their clients below. I don't really see that as the way this business model is going to operate in terms of a stability way. I do believe it would be kind of more efficient and we'd reach more people positively through a service. And then eventually me making some sort of exit and then actually going in to build something in cell biology or quantum, because those are the fields that I'm seeing growing really fast in AI right now.
So what's happening in cell biology and quantum?
Quite a lot, actually.
So
Quite a lot
fascinating.
insider knowledge. But quantum computing is sort of making an uprise in the space of AI, because with quantum computing, you can actually curate queries faster. So the way these different models work, you have the standard OpenAI models. They operate on what we call bits. So literally 2, so zeros and ones. That's the standard code that we have. You kind of learn that, you know, when you're typing, when you see a computer screen that's blank, it's like zeros and ones. That's the standard. But if we look at quantum computing, with quantum, it's using light and diffraction and all this sort of physics, space stuff applied into the actual AI tools. And so with them, they're using qubits. So instead of having just zeros and ones, you have 4 options. With those 4 options, you can create faster response times. And with that, you can actually build faster AI models.
Right.
So that's where quantum computing is taking AI. With cell biology, it's fundamental to us as humans. Like, it's why we are here today. And so what we're going to start seeing is possibly even more model organisms kind of mapped artificially and faster to support things like if somebody has a kidney failure, for example, they could have an artificial based kidney because it will support going from
You're gonna have to repeat that.
You're gonna have to. So what I'm envisioning right now while you describe that, does that involve 3D printing?
Yes.
So would it be a
exactly.
3D printed a kidney or heart or whatever organ
Absolutely.
that is controlled by software?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Terrifying to me, though. I don't know why. It's just so. It doesn't make any logical sense because
I don't have so much of a moral conflict with it because for me, I see it in the same way as cancer treatment.
That's
and
absolutely.
I see it in the same way as...
It's not a moral thing for me. It's just fear-based, whereby for some reason, I don't know why, but the concept of an external organism that is man-made versus something that I was born with and an organism that is organic to the body.
I know what you mean,
Do you
but
get-
it's
do you get
the
what I
same
mean?
as it's the same as cancer treatment though, and it's the same as
You're right.
female healthcare.
Or like
You're right,
artificial
but cancer
valves.
treatment-
Artificial valves. It's the
cancer
same as
treatment
having an epidural when you give
Yeah.
birth.
But that's temporary. It's not something you live with for the rest of your life. That's
Well, no, because you have things like heart valves put in.
Absolutely. Yes.
which terrifies me
yeah.
as well.
Fair enough.
But I guess they have no
Fair enough.
choice ultimately.
Of course, you
know?
need to get to
Yeah.
that point where that's your last option.
Absolutely.
Which
And that would be the
Yeah.
last option, I think. So
don't get me wrong, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm just playing devil's advocate
absolutely.
No,
advocate
it's
here, and I'm
interesting.
thinking
It's important.
about all of the things that terrify people, which
Yeah.
I see online
Yeah.
every day.
Well, it's interesting because this conversation is reminding me of when I watched this video about when calculators first became commercial.
Yes.
And all the maths professors striked, came out on the streets saying this is going to take their jobs, this is going to destroy society, students won't be able to think and use their brains anymore. And there was a whole revolt against it. Same with like when the toaster came into commercial use and people were like, this is going to destroy women's roles in the kitchen.
And now look where we are.
Perfect housewife having a fit.
So like,
It's true.
It's true, right? So it just makes me think, as you were saying, with AI, yes, we're at such a fetal stage in it right now, and the sort of fluffy stuff will leave, and maybe at that point, that's when you can focus on the products which are going to be the ones which are really going to make a difference.
Absolutely. Because there's so much noise in this space. I'm sure the both of you hear from new AI tools like all the time on your feeds and you're just overwhelmed. And that's inherently what AI is doing to us, but also social media. It's a combination of everything. So I do hope that there will be a time where this sort of noise signals and, fades out. And if there's not, I think with time, we'll be able to see where the real monopolies and startups lie, even though, those monopolies are really just going to continue dominating, I think.
I think a lot of it is very much clickbait because
Yes.
AI is something
Hugely.
that fascinates us as a society so much that people just tend to throw companies or startup leaders, they tend to throw it around and use it even when it's not really applicable.
Absolutely.
So I guess at that point there needs to be more legislation that sort of regulates the term and gives it more credibility. But I think something that's also interesting is the whole sustainability aspect to it. And that's obviously going to be a growing issue.
Yeah.
We're going to need, more machines to power whatever
what's
we
your
want to
opinion
build.
on that?
So what's your...
Is it a big problem?
It is quite a big problem. I think the reason why we haven't built faster models is because we don't have data centers for them, especially in the UK. And that's another huge debate that happened during the AI summit a couple months ago. They were sort of saying, okay, why can AI not be part of the sovereign, I guess, state of the UK? Why are we not building as fast? And there was a Scottish data center leader, and he was just saying, we don't have infrastructure. We don't. We literally have Victorian era buildings, and we're trying to implement
Industrial
AI.
age.
Exactly.
I was thinking about that earlier when you were describing it. This is like the AI industrial era.
It is.
Essentially.
It is.
Like there are all these different floating pieces that we're trying to put together, and the supply chain's not quite supply chaining.
No, exactly.
It's all just a shambles.
It's all just a bit scrappy.
So we are in the pre-CASM phase for sure. So you are in the perfect era to get started, I think, to learn and to just put yourself out there. And that could honestly be either through thought leadership, through making a silly little TikTok that gets you like 2 million views for no reason, anything out there to start just talking and breaking down those barriers, because it might seem to us that there's not so many barriers. It's kind of, okay, it's easy. You just open chat on your phone. But to a lot of people, it's not the case. You would be very surprised. To very senior leaders who think,
It is quite daunting. It's
It is.
objectively quite daunting. What would you say are the biggest pieces of misinformation that are out there?
There's quite a lot, I would say, mainly focused around the idea that AI is going to take over us as an entire human species, basically. This is what I keep hearing all the time. So that's huge fear mongering, because for us, AI is a tool. It's really not going to replace us. Another one that is really prominent is the idea of jobs being lost and entire industry just being completely flipped on their head. I do agree. Some jobs will be made redundant, but I think that's natural over the course of time anyways, because AI brings ample opportunity to put in roles like prompt engineer, and you don't need to be a coder to understand prompt engineering at all. So I think it's more about seeing the positives, that more jobs are going to be multiplied because of this technology now. But there's quite a few. I'm trying to think of a couple others that come to mind. But just a lot of myths in general in terms of marketing, and you'll be left behind if you don't learn these 85,000 tools. Like, you just need to know how to prompt engineer, how to ask good questions, and understand that, yes, your neurons will change because everybody's neurons are changing, because our brains were not built for this level of technological advancement anyway. The same thing happened to us in the industrial era when we were seeing cars and machines. Our brains naturally have to expand. So I think that sort of links to the idea of it will be okay. You don't really, it's not going to be a bad thing inherently. You just need to have a very positive mindset about AI. And I believe the Luddites are definitely going to be, they will have.
It's another growth curve.
Yes,
it's another growth curve.
I think it'll be very interesting to see where AI goes in the next 2 years, though, because there was a report released called AI 2027 that is actually fascinating. It's kind of a bit of fear mongering, in my opinion, but I would recommend anyone to read it. It's sort of, I believe two of OpenAI's biggest AI researchers sat down and kind of curated this piece, and they're notorious for being predictors. So they are always kind of like, okay, this is what my instinct is telling me. This is what's going to be there. So I don't know how true this is, but it's really cool to sort of read through it and see almost two pathways of what AI is going to do. So you can read it like a story and then choose your ending. And the sort of phrases and words, they don't obviously say open AI, they say open brain, but you can kind of understand, right, where it's going. And in one way, it's basically we move on to a completely different new planet by the time the AI becomes entirely, apparent. And the other side is just we learn to live with it like a tool. So you can see there's like so much fear mongering that no one really knows what is next. And that sort of cascades down into regulation as well, because we don't really know what to regulate if you think about it. And it does sound scary, but simultaneously, if you think about the innovation side of things, think about how fast we're going to, accumulate knowledge and how fast we're going to grow as societies now that we have democratized access to this technology.
Yeah.
We're not stuck behind paywalls anymore.
Absolutely.
What do you think in the course of AI's boom, what do you think was the pivotal point? And can you explain the actual functions behind it that enabled it to take off? So obviously it was when ChatGPT happened.
Yes.
But what happened before then?
Yeah. So AI has been around since 1956. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So the term was coined in 1956, and that sort of kick-started the idea of, okay, let's try to emulate the human brain. That was the initial sort of idea of AI. And of course that scares so many people because they think, oh my gosh, our brains how are we going to do that? But initially it was just a couple of scientists who were super nerdy and they really liked the brain. They liked neuroscience, but they were also very, very good at computers and tech. And that cascaded down into the first ever chatbot being built in around 1960, I believe, called Eliza. I went to San Francisco to visit a mentor, and we went to one of the first ever computer museums, and I got to see what the Eliza looked like.
Cool.
Fascinating. It was on this old Mac that literally looked like it had a brain, one of those massive computers. And it was just a really simple text-based model that was sort of saying, hello, how are you? And then you could type on the screen and it would give you answers back and respond to you, but didn't really understand what you meant with your questions and queries, if that makes sense. So it was mainly just kind of automated responses. And then that kind of cascaded into multiple different winters. So AI crashing down and then coming back again. So we've actually experienced 3 different crashes of AI across the years for it to become mainstream now. So I think that's so fascinating initially. And what sort of kickstarted this ChatGPT version off is the idea that it's a GPT. So it means that not only do we have text communicating with us, but we have an interface that makes it slightly more human and attractive. Absolutely. It was actually finding the correct interface that made us see, okay, it's very easy to use. Let's get started.
So it's just the way it was packaged fundamentally, but the technology was already there. That's so interesting.
Absolutely.
Something that I've been reading a lot about, because I studied English literature, so I'm really into that space.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate surrounding how the model was trained, and the fact that it was trained on copyrighted novels and copyrighted work.
Yeah.
And none of the authors that were involved in that, none of the authors' work was ever...
They never gave consent.
Yeah, they never gave consent. They weren't paid. And now what has happened is that you now have a model that it can't write a novel, but basically, it can give you a really...
Good
if you
enough,
prompt it well,
you can get them.
You can get there, but that's off the back of that work. And so I can understand that, if I were a best-selling author who released a book 10, 15 years ago and that was used, I would be really mad.
Yes.
But that's, as you said, a question of legislation not catching up in time.
I agree.
So do you have any opinion on that? Any more insights? Because I just find it so interesting.
Like the whole Studio Ghibli
Absolutely.
saga.
I think it is very real. It is. And I'm definitely a tech optimist. Love the usage of AI, but with discernment. And I think here is where the question is what is being, used and what is being trained on. Because I do believe that these AI models are taking data that they should not be taking.
Right. Yes.
And now actually OpenAI have a feature where you can go into settings. If you look closely enough, you can see this, to turn off data training. So I would recommend everyone to do that as well.
Right.
Going literally into your profile and switching that off so that any of your conversations can't be used to train the models. Because inherently, that's precisely what AI does.
I didn't know that was a choice.
Yes.
I thought that
only
was...
Only now.
I thought that only now.
Only a month ago.
Right. So it's been around for, 2 and a bit years.
No, but that's so useful to know.
Absolutely.
And is that off the back of legal cases?
Yes. They're trying to
That is so
protect themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think tools like Perplexity, which is essentially just an AI-powered search engine that not a lot of people use or know about, I think it's incredible. they sort of do train. They are the ones with the heaviest lawsuits because they train on these different, texts and models, etc. But then they also provide citations for you, so you can see directly where it's come from.
Right.
So that's, I think, one of the biggest lawsuits that are hitting, AI just in general at the moment is Perplexity. So it's a case of when you create these models, it's very difficult to then control what it's sort of learning on. Because initially, I guess the AI engineers would have curated these pieces to say, okay, go ahead, now go learn. They didn't really think about this side of, the debate and actually realizing, okay, people's real work and livelihoods are at stake in a way, especially in the creative spheres. A lot of creatives, all the singers, artists, etc., coming together to sign anti-AI bills because they are worried that they will be deep faked, voice cloned, that you can view their content ahead of time. I think it's a very real debate and it's a very real issue that's happening. I don't know personally what's going to happen with that, but I do believe that if we use it as a tool and use it correctly, we won't get to those spaces.
That's really interesting though, because the concept of artists being scared that, there are so many fake Instagram influencers that are earning so much money, and there are, people that are behind that are literally just generating content with fake avatars. But I also think from a psychological and sociological point of view, that's interesting, because the reason why I don't think that's going to keep on working is because I think as human beings, the notion of celebrity is inevitably tied to someone that we recognize as similar to us and human.
100%.
And so for that to continue to happen, we would have to completely disassociate. That might happen, but I don't think it's going to happen before 10 to 15 years.
That's what
it's too big of a shift.
Yes.
Sociologically and in terms of the way that our brain works.
I agree. But then I also noticed in Vogue, I think last week, they had their first AI model campaign.
Really?
And I was shocked.
I think that's just trend jumping.
Yes,
probably.
I agree. Even if you look at how these models are trained, when we curate, LLMs, large language models, which is what we use OpenAI today, they have to have people in the back end looking at every single photo to discern, is this good for AI, is this not? So I read a book called Code Dependent, absolutely fascinating book, where this author, who was an FT scientific writer, actually went through the back end of AI to reveal exactly what happens. How is AI even curated? How is it sustainable today? I believe she went to Kenya and then to India as well to go and explore. They have data labeling centers there by Meta, basically bought out by Meta, to get loads of different workers to actually sit in front of screens for 8 hours longer to go and have a look at every single photo that AI has curated. And sometimes the photos that she was describing are horrific. They are almost mentally disturbing. Absolutely. And they have to say, yes, this is good for AI. Yeah, no, this is not. And just sort of do a swiping on all of these different photos. So she was saying, just imagine the impact on them.
Psychological impact,
absolutely.
Of course.
That's brainwashing level
absolutely.
damage.
Absolutely. And we don't see that in mainstream media. It's sort of just we're only looking at, oh yay, these AI tools are so great for us. Mia
on LinkedIn.
Mia on LinkedIn. And then in the back end, it's someone in Kenya who's actually sitting there for hours, and that's his day job.
Ideja, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
You're a mega genius.
Thank you so much.
Can't wait to see where you go and what happens with your business.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Honored to be here. It was such a great conversation. Thank you to the both of you.
Thank you.